Chapter 1. The assignment Riley Sinclair had covered corruption, scandals, and power plays, but nothing prepared them for this. Their editor, a no-nonsense woman with graying hair and a permanent air of exhaustion, barely looked up from her laptop as she delivered the news. Sinclair, you're covering Alex Davenport's engagement announcement. Riley's stomach twisted. Alex Davenport. A name that still burned at the edges of memory, that still carried the taste of stolen kisses and whispered promises. A name they had sworn to forget. You're kidding, Riley said, forcing a smirk they didn't feel. Do I look like I joke? Their editor's eyes flicked up, unimpressed. It's a big deal. She's engaged to Senator Jonathan Hale, which makes this the wedding of the year. We need an angle. You're good with angles. Riley sat back in their chair, feigning nonchalance while their pulse pounded. Alex, engaged, to a politician. The same Alex who once swore she'd never be part of a world built on illusions. The irony was suffocating. You want me to write about love and happily ever afters? Riley scoffed, crossing their arms. I cover real stories, not PR fluff. Their editor finally gave them a real look. Then find the real story. If there's dirt, dig it up. If there's scandal, expose it. If it's all legitimate, write the damn fairy tale. Either way, you're going. Riley exhaled slowly, gripping the armrest as if that would steady them. There was no getting out of this. 2 days from now, they'd be standing in the same room as Alex Davenport, the woman who once loved them, then left them behind. And Riley had no idea if they were ready for that. Chapter 2. Ghosts of Us. Riley had always imagined seeing Alex again, sometimes in anger, sometimes in longing, never in indifference. But standing in the grand ballroom of the Davenport estate, surrounded by champagne glasses and expensive smiles, they felt something worse than anger. They felt history clawing its way back. The event was immaculate, just like Alex. Golden chandeliers bathed the guests in warm light. Soft piano music hummed in the background, and well-dressed politicians clinked glasses, their laughter carefully measured. It was a world Alex used to say she'd never belong to. But there she was center stage. Alex stood beside Senator Jonathan Hale, her poised smile a masterpiece of restraint. Her auburn hair, once wild and wind-blown from late-night motorcycle rides, was now smoothed into elegant waves. Her hazel eyes, once so open and full of fire, were distant, unreadable. She looked perfect. She looked untouchable. She looked nothing like the woman Riley used to love. Riley forced their gaze away, gripping their notebook like it was an anchor. They shouldn't care. They were here for the story, not for the past. But then, as if drawn by an unseen force, Alex's eyes flickered across the room and landed on them. The moment stretched, a heartbeat frozen in time. Riley saw it, the flicker of recognition, of something deeper beneath the polished facade, a crack in the armor. But then Alex blinked, and just like that, the mask returned. Jonathan turned to her with some charming comment, and Alex laughed too soft, too rehearsed. Riley felt something inside them curl with resentment. She chose this. Years ago, when Riley had nothing but a dream and a cheap apartment, Alex had promised forever. They had talked about running away, about building something real, until the moment Alex changed her mind. I need stability, Riley. I need a future that isn't a gamble. And just like that, she was gone. Now here she was, standing beside a man who represented everything Riley had never been: powerful, polished, predictable. The memory was acid on their tongue. Riley Sinclair. The voice was smooth, practiced, deceptively calm. Riley looked up to find Alex standing before them, her expression unreadable. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Riley smirked, tapping their pen against their notebook. Alex Davenport, engaged to a senator. Guess you finally found that stability you wanted. A shadow passed over Alex's face, but her posture remained perfect. And you're still using that sharp tongue of yours to cover stories that aren't yours to tell. Riley tilted their head, pretending the words didn't sting. You'd be surprised what I can uncover when I dig deep enough. Alex's gaze didn't waver. Some things should stay buried. There it was, the unspoken warning. Riley could play along. They could write the polished, PR-approved version of this event and walk away. Or they could find out why Alex's laugh didn't reach her eyes. Riley had never been good at walking away. Chapter 3. Paper-thin formalities. Riley wasn't sure what was worse, the manufactured elegance of the engagement party, or the fact that Alex had perfected the art of pretending they never happened. Everywhere they turned, someone was singing Alex's praises. She's so poised. She's so intelligent. She's going to be the perfect senator's wife. Riley wanted to laugh. These people had no idea who Alex really was. Or maybe she wasn't that person anymore. They took a sip of champagne, scanning the room, but their gaze inevitably found her again. Alex. She stood beneath a chandelier that cast golden light across her auburn hair. She was laughing at something her fiancé said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The perfect couple. The perfect lie. And then, as if she could feel Riley's thoughts pressing against her skin, she looked up. For a moment, the crowd faded into nothing. The room, the music, the clinking glasses, none of it existed. Just them. Just this unbearable, electric silence. Riley's fingers curled around their glass. Alex's expression didn't change, but Riley saw it, the slight hitch in her breath, the way her throat moved when she swallowed. She turned away first. Of course she did. Riley exhaled sharply, but before they could retreat into another glass of overpriced champagne, a voice pulled them back. Sinclair. Their editor barked, appearing at their side. Interview. Now. Riley blinked. Excuse me. The happy couple, she said, nodding toward Alex and her fiancé. We need a quote for the piece. You're the one writing it, so you're the one asking. Riley nearly laughed. Of course, because the universe was a cruel, spiteful thing. Before they could argue, their editor was already waving Alex and Jonathan over. Riley barely had time to smooth their expression before Alex was standing in front of them again, close enough to smell her perfume, the same damn perfume she used to wear. Riley, Alex said smoothly, as if their last conversation hadn't been dripping with barely restrained hostility. It's good to see you again. Liar. Riley forced a smile. Likewise. Congratulations on the engagement. Jonathan grinned, slipping an arm around Alex's waist. Thank you. We're thrilled. Riley's grip on their pen tightened. It shouldn't sting, but it did. So, Riley said, flipping open their notebook. Tell me, how did this fairy tale begin? Jonathan launched into some story about meeting at a gala, about shared values, about a connection that felt like fate. Riley barely heard him. They were too busy watching Alex. Her expression was composed, her posture perfect, but her hands were fidgeting. A slow twist of the ring on her finger, the same way she used to fidget with Riley's jacket sleeves when she was nervous. The words coming from her mouth were smooth, rehearsed, but her eyes were screaming. Riley leaned in just slightly, lowering their voice. And what about you, Alex? She hesitated just for a second, barely noticeable. But Riley noticed. Jonathan has already said it beautifully, she said finally. I couldn't be happier. Another lie. And just like that, Riley knew. This wasn't just a story. Something was wrong. And if Alex thought they were going to let this go, she was dead wrong. Chapter 4. Cracks in the perfect facade. Riley wasn't supposed to care. They were supposed to write a clean, drama-free article about Alex and her perfect engagement, cash their paycheck, and walk away. That was the plan. But Alex's eyes had told a different story. So instead of sleeping, Riley found themselves in their apartment, hunched over their laptop, peeling back the layers of Jonathan Hale. On the surface, he was exactly what he claimed to be: charming, influential, a rising political star. The son of old money, a champion of traditional values, and beloved by donors who liked their politicians scandal-free. But Riley had spent their career uncovering the dirt beneath polished reputations. And Jonathan Hale was too clean, so they dug deeper. At first, there was nothing but glowing headlines, charity events, and strategic photo ops. But then, a thread. A small lawsuit, buried in legal jargon, dismissed quietly. A woman claiming workplace harassment. A payoff. Riley's pulse quickened. The deeper they went, the more they found. Another accusation. Another settlement. A pattern. Women who had worked under him. Women who had spoken up only to be silenced. And Alex was engaged to this man. Riley pushed back from their desk, running a hand through their hair. Their mind raced. Did she know? Had she chosen to ignore it? Or was she just another piece in his carefully curated image? They thought of the way she hesitated when Jonathan spoke for her, the way her hands fidgeted with her ring. Riley had promised themselves they wouldn't get involved. But this wasn't just about their past anymore. This was about Alex's future. And if she wouldn't save herself, Riley would do it for her. Chapter 5. A Dangerous Game. Riley stared at their laptop screen, the cursor blinking like a silent dare. The evidence was right there. Jonathan Hale was a fraud, a predator, a man who built his career on silencing the women he hurt. Publishing this story would be career-defining. It would also destroy Alex's engagement, her reputation, and maybe even her future. Their fingers hovered over the keyboard. This should have been an easy decision. Exposing corruption was what they did. It was the whole reason they became a journalist. But this wasn't just any story. This was Alex, and that made all the difference. They shut the laptop with a sharp exhale, raking a hand through their hair. They needed air. Alex felt like she was suffocating. The engagement party had been a success, on paper. She had smiled in all the right places, laughed at all the right jokes, played the role of the perfect fiancée. But ever since Riley had walked back into her life, the cracks in her carefully built walls were starting to show. It was ridiculous, irrational. She shouldn't still feel this way. Riley was her past, and she had chosen her future. And yet, she found herself watching the door whenever she entered a room, half expecting Riley to be there with that infuriating smirk, challenging her in ways no one else ever had. She had made her choice. Riley was a complication she could not afford. And yet, when her phone vibrated with a new message, she reached for it faster than she should have. Riley, we need to talk. Now. Her heart pounded. She should ignore it. Instead, she grabbed her coat and walked out the door. Chapter 6. A Line We Shouldn't Cross. The first time Alex met Riley in secret, she told herself it was just one conversation. The second time, she told herself it was closure. The third time, she stopped making excuses. Midnight. A quiet bar tucked away from the city's eyes, the kind of place where politicians didn't drink and cameras didn't lurk. Alex sat across from Riley, fingers wrapped around a whiskey glass she hadn't touched. The air between them felt thick, charged, dangerous. You wanted to talk, Alex said, her voice steady, betraying nothing. So talk. Riley studied her, their silver rings spinning idly on their finger, a nervous habit Alex remembered all too well. You know what I found, don't you? Alex's grip on the glass tightened. She did. She had spent the last 48 hours unraveling the same thread Riley had pulled. She had seen the lawsuits, the hush money, the lies Jonathan had built his career on. She had wanted stability, but what she had was a monster in a tailored suit. Alex exhaled, setting the glass down carefully. Are you going to publish it? Riley hesitated, their eyes sharp, knowing, too familiar, searched hers, waiting for a reaction. Do you want me to? Riley asked softly. Alex should say yes. Instead, she whispered, I don't know. A silence, the kind that pressed against her ribs, made it hard to breathe. Riley leaned forward, their voice low, electric. You don't love him. Alex's pulse stuttered. That's not, you don't. Riley's gaze was relentless, unforgiving. You can lie to the cameras, to your fiancé, to yourself, but not to me. Alex's breath shuddered. Don't do this. Riley tilted their head, considering her. Then they reached across the table. Fingers brushed against hers, barely a touch, but it burned. Alex should pull away. She should end this. But she didn't move. The bar felt suddenly too small. The world too quiet. It was just them, sitting at a table, on the edge of a choice neither of them was ready to make. I hate you, Alex whispered, though her fingers curled slightly beneath Riley's. No, you don't, Riley murmured, lips curving into the ghost of a smirk. And God help her, Alex didn't. That night they walked away before anything could happen. But the next time, they didn't. Chapter 7. One night, no promises. Riley had spent the whole evening trying to convince themselves that this was over. They weren't going to chase Alex. They weren't going to let old feelings sink their claws in deeper than they already had. But when the knock came sharp, insistent, desperate, they knew exactly who it was before they even opened the door. And there she stood, Alex, soaked from the rain, shivering, looking at Riley like they were the only thing keeping her from breaking apart. Riley's throat went dry. Alex, tell me to leave, she whispered, voice wrecked, hair clinging to her skin. Tell me to go, and I will. Riley's fingers clenched against the doorframe. Everything in them screamed to stop this, to remind her that she was engaged, that this was a mistake, that there were a million reasons they should shut this door. But none of that mattered when Alex took a shaky step forward, her gaze flickering down to Riley's lips before meeting their eyes again, pleading, daring, waiting. Riley swallowed hard. I'm not telling you to leave. A breath, a pause, and then Alex was on them. Lips crashing into Riley's, hands fisting into their shirt. Nothing careful, nothing slow. Riley barely had time to shut the door before they were stumbling backward, their mouths never breaking apart. It was fire and history, and every unsaid thing between them, unraveling all at once. Riley's hands slid into Alex's damp hair, tugging, swallowing the sound she made. God, they missed this. The way Alex fit against them. The way she burned like she had been waiting for this as long as they had. They barely made it to the bedroom. Clothes hit the floor. Gasps filled the dark. They didn't stop. Not when Riley's hands mapped familiar curves. Not when Alex whispered their name like a secret she had never truly let go of. Not even when they both knew this would change everything. Morning came too soon. Alex stirred first, sunlight creeping through Riley's apartment, painting golden lines across bare skin and tangled sheets. Riley woke to find her watching them, expression unreadable, fingers ghosting over their arm. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, softly, too softly, Alex whispered, "This doesn't change anything." Riley exhaled through their nose, rolling onto their back. Of course it didn't. Because in the real world, Alex was still engaged to Jonathan Hale. And last night was just borrowed time. Chapter 9. The breaking point. Riley sat in their editor's office, the weight of the article pressing down on them like a loaded gun. "This is it, Sinclair," their editor said, slapping the printed draft onto the desk. "This story is career-making. You publish this, and you take down Jonathan Hale for good." Riley's stomach twisted. They should be celebrating. This was exactly the kind of exposure they lived for: corruption, power abuse, lies hidden beneath perfectly pressed suits. But all they could think about was Alex. If this story went live, it wouldn't just be Jonathan's reputation on the line. It would be hers. Her carefully built world, her future in politics, the stability she had chosen over them, it would all come crumbling down. Their editor eyed them. "What's the problem?" Riley swallowed. "It's complicated." A scoff. "It's not. Hale's a fraud. You've got the proof. You're a journalist, Sinclair, not a damn PR agent. Are you hesitating because of Alex Davenport?" Riley's jaw tightened. Because of Alex. Because she was tangled in every part of this. Because even after everything, Riley still loved her. "I need time," they said finally. Their editor leaned forward. "You have 12 hours. Either you run the story, or I'll find someone who will." Alex felt the walls closing in. Jonathan had been watching her differently. His smiles were still practiced, his touch still calculated, but something had changed. His grip was tighter, his patience thinner. And now, as he poured himself a glass of bourbon in their penthouse, he finally said what had been simmering beneath the surface. "You've been distracted," he said, swirling the drink in his hand. "And I have to wonder, does that have anything to do with Riley Sinclair?" Alex's breath caught. She schooled her expression into something unreadable. "I don't know what you're talking about." Jonathan chuckled, low and sharp. "Don't insult me, darling." He took a slow sip, then met her gaze, all pretense stripped away. "You and I both know that this engagement isn't about love," he said, voice smooth, deliberate. "It's about power, image, stability." He took another step closer, his shadow stretching over hers. "But if you start making messy choices, like running back to a journalist who would love nothing more than to tear me down, then that puts everything we've built at risk." Alex's pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't a threat. This was a warning. Jonathan reached out, brushing his fingers against her cheek, a touch that once might have reassured her, but now only made her skin crawl. "So tell me, sweetheart." His voice was almost a whisper. "Are you still mine?" Her heart slammed against her ribs. This was it, the moment, the choice. If she stayed, she kept the life she had fought to build, the future she had chosen, no matter how hollow it felt. If she walked away, she lost everything, except maybe the only thing that had ever been real. She thought of Riley, their sharp tongue and soft touches, their fire and their stubborn, stupid heart. The way they kissed her like she was worth ruining for. Alex inhaled and chose. Chapter 10. The only choice left. Riley stared at the blinking cursor on their screen, their chest tight with the weight of what they were about to do. Alex had made her choice, and it wasn't them. She had stayed, with him, with the life she had built, the illusion she refused to shatter. Maybe she thought she could fix it. Maybe she was too scared to let go. Either way, Riley was done being her secret. Their fingers moved over the keyboard, the words pouring out in clean, precise sentences, cold facts, undeniable evidence, an empire of lies unraveling in real time. Jonathan Hale was not the man he pretended to be. The article exposed it all, the lawsuits, the settlements, the women he had silenced. Every carefully hidden scandal was brought into the light, every whisper turned into a scream. But before they hit publish, Riley added something else. A final note, buried between the lines. A love story. They never named her outright, but she was there, woven into the words like a ghost. A woman who once set the world on fire, only to be trapped in a cage of her own making. A love that had burned bright, too reckless to survive. A choice that had never really been a choice at all. Riley wasn't sure if Alex would read it, but if she did, she would know. This was Riley's goodbye. With a deep breath, they hit publish. The fallout was immediate. The article exploded across the media, headlines flashing in bold, merciless letters. Jonathan Hale exposed, scandal rocks political world. His campaign was in freefall, his supporters scrambling for damage control. Lawsuits were reopened, investigations launched. The perfect man had been unmasked, and the world was hungry for blood. And Alex was caught in the storm. Her engagement was over before the day ended. Jonathan's team released a carefully worded statement about differences in values, but everyone knew the truth. She was abandoned by her fiancé, by the public who had once adored her. Every interview she had ever given was picked apart, every word she had spoken twisted against her. The headlines weren't kind. Did she know? Davenport's silence under fire from darling to disgraced, the rise and fall of Alex, Davenport the world turned on her overnight. And just like that, she disappeared. No statements, no rebuttals, nothing. As if she had never been there at all. And Riley told themselves they had done the right thing, that the ache in their chest would fade, that Alex had never really been theirs to begin with. But late at night, when the world went quiet, they found themselves wondering if she ever thought about coming back. Chapter 11. Ghosts and Paper Cuts. Riley told themselves they had moved on. Months had passed since the article, since Alex vanished from the public eye. The world had moved on new scandals, new headlines, new names to be torn apart and forgotten. Riley threw themselves into work, into late nights and cheap whiskey, into stories that didn't come with ghosts attached. They told themselves that Alex Davenport was nothing but a lesson learned, until they found the letter. It was waiting for them when they got home, slipped under their apartment door. No return address, just their name, written in a familiar, slanted hand that sent a bolt of something sharp and aching straight through their chest. Riley hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of the envelope. For a moment, they considered not reading it, leaving it sealed, unread, inconsequential. But they never had been good at ignoring Alex. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No long-winded explanations, no pleas for forgiveness. Just one sentence, handwritten in ink that looked like it had been pressed onto the page with shaking hands. You were never my secret. You were always my truth. Riley's breath left them in a slow, uneven exhale. For a long time, they just stood there, staring at the words. Then, almost against their will, their fingers curled tighter around the letter, like maybe if they held on hard enough, they could stop themselves from falling all over again. Chapter 12. A Truth That Won't Be Hidden. Riley's hands shook as they set the letter down on the table. The words still burned against their skin, seared into their mind. Alex's truth. Their truth. The silence in the room felt heavy, suffocating, like the entire world was holding its breath. Riley's pulse thudded in their ears, the weight of the letter sitting like a stone in their chest. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for this moment, the door creaked open. Riley turned, and there she was, Alex. But she wasn't the poised, perfect public figure anymore. She wasn't the woman who had hidden behind a smile, behind the expectations of everyone around her. She stood there, drenched from the rain, her eyes wide but not guarded. She wore nothing but the raw truth of who she was. She had no mask, no shields, just her unbroken, unfiltered, and as real as Riley had always known her to be. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick, suffused with the weight of everything they had been through, the pain, the distance, the years lost. Riley felt something shift inside them, something that made their heart ache and their breath catch all at once. Alex's voice was soft but steady. I wasn't brave enough before. I wasn't strong enough to choose you, and I was scared of the world, of losing everything. Her eyes met Riley's, and for the first time, there was no distance between them, no walls. But I'm not scared anymore, Riley. Riley's throat tightened, a lump forming as they stared at her, trying to piece together the words. What are you saying? Alex took a cautious step forward. I'm saying I'm here. I'm not running anymore. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached out, brushing against Riley's hand. "I'm saying you were always my truth." Riley felt their heart break open. For a long time, they had wondered if this moment would ever come, if Alex would ever stand in front of them like this, raw and vulnerable, with nothing left to hide. But now that she was here, it was terrifying. Riley wanted to pull her close, to kiss her and make up for every second they had lost. But there was something still fragile between them, a hesitation, a fear that, despite everything, they might lose each other all over again. But Alex didn't pull away. She stayed there, her eyes wide with uncertainty, but also with something else. Something Riley hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. So Riley did the only thing they could do. They stepped forward, closing the distance between them. And when they kissed, it wasn't a quick, desperate thing. It was slow and tentative, like they were learning each other all over again. Like they were afraid to make the same mistakes, afraid of loving too much and getting burned. But there was no turning back now. They kissed like it was the beginning of something new, a risk, a chance, because love is messy. It's painful and it's complicated, and sometimes it feels like it could break you. But in that moment, Riley knew it was worth the risk. And so together, they let themselves fall.